Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast. And today, as we're recording this towards the end of January, I am so excited to announce that this morning, when I went and checked the results for the podcast, that we are at a total of over 5,000 listeners to the podcast since it started. So I wanted to say, just before we begin, a huge thank you to all of you. Now that that's accomplished, though, the next goal. So it took me 3.5 years to get 5,000 listeners. I'm hoping to do 10,000 by the end of the year. Big, hairy, audacious goal, I know, but I believe it can be done. So today I'm excited about the topic because when you are, a consultant, a professional speaker, a coach, your personal brand is so important. And that's why I'm so excited to have Roy Osing here today, because he's the guy that took a startup to $1 billion in annual sales. He's the only author, entrepreneur, and executive leader who delivers practical and proven, audacious, unheard of ways. I love that, to produce high performing businesses and successful careers. So, Roy is a former president, CMO, and entrepreneur with over 40 years of successful and unmatched executive leadership experience in every aspect of business. He's the president of a major data and internet company. His leadership, uh, yeah, and the president of a major data and internet company. Welcome to the show, Roy.
Thank you very much, Kim, for having me here. I'm grateful.
Sorry about that introduction. When I copied and pasted it, it just copied a whole section that. That's what you get. I didn't read it ahead of time.
That's
Oh,
that's
naughty Kim.
that's quite all right. That doesn't really matter in the total scheme of things, does it? It's all good.
No. So, Roy, since this is your first time on the Author to Authority podcast, why don't you take a few minutes, introduce yourself, share a little bit more of your story and how you've been able to come to do some of these amazing things?
Yeah, well, so as you mentioned, I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to lead a company in the data and internet space from its very early stages over a number of years, and we actually built it. And I got to tell you, Kim, I get goosebumps when I think about this. We actually built it to over $1 billion in annual sales, which is a remarkable achievement for a team of people who were dedicated to do extraordinary things. And I have to thank them for their hard work and their passion. But this was a long kind of journey for me because at the heart of the ability to actually grow a business like that was my learning and understanding that the key to all of this stuff was execution. It wasn't so
Mm-hmm.
much about getting the plan pristine, because you'll never will. It's not a perfect world. You'll never get anything perfect. And I understood that a long, long time ago. So I set upon a journey of doing imperfect things as fast as I could and differently than the way other people thought of them. Okay. So I've written 7 books around this whole concept called Be Different or Be Dead. And the notion there is if you're not different, you're going to be irrelevant and dead sooner or later. And so I've spent my life trying to figure out how to be different in a way that drove superlative performance, and the key there was execution. So I'm your execution dude. That's what I've done, and it's practical stuff. Okay, I learned
Mm-hmm.
really, really young to take my textbook, which helped me to a point, and put it aside. And so I was the guy that looked at actually casting away traditional stuff that may have worked in the past, but yesterday's relevance, if I can call it that, and take on some new practical stuff. I'm the guy that created killing dumb rules, cutting the crap, hiring for goosebumps, strategic micromanagement. For those out there that don't believe in micromanagement, you're listening to a dude that does, and has been quite successful micromanaging a certain aspect of the business. So my whole thing was practicality and things that lit fires in people. And why is that important? Well, it was important because it aided execution. And so I've spent 4 decades understanding how to be different, how to execute, how to light fires in people. And that's the essence of my brand. I'm the guy that actually did it. I have an MBA, but it's a different kind of an MBA, Kim. It's a master's of business achievement. That's what Roy is.
Mm, love that. Love that. So let's go back for a couple of minutes and just explore this a bit. Uh, One of the things I love to do on the podcast is just explore some of the maybe harder areas that you had because, we look at someone like you and we go, wow, he must be special. He must be, and I am not. Right. So I
Yeah.
love to highlight some of the difficulties so that people can see that everyday people, normal people, now, normal people with some exceptional skills, some exceptional discipline, some exceptional different things. But talk about some of the difficulties that you went through during that time because you don't grow to $1 billion in annual sales without some difficulties.
Oh no, it was amazingly difficult. I mean, that's when I realized that pain was a strategic concept. Okay, because if you can't if you can't tolerate pain, then forget it.
Yeah.
Like the kind of role I had was taking a monopoly business into a highly competitive market, customer driven kind of world. And so we had to change cultures. We had a
Mm,
traditional voice culture. We had to make it an internet culture and adopt different skills and different competencies. And in order to do that, I had to basically throw out a lot of the stuff that worked yesterday and replace it with what I considered these audacious, simple things that lit fires in people to go in a different direction. So I had a whole cadre of people, peers, executive peers, who didn't really like that. They loved hanging on to the past. They liked the warmth and the comfort of yesterday's relevance, and didn't really appreciate that here's a young guy
mm,
who wanted to do things differently and who preached that and who actually got people fired up to do it. And so it was
mm,
happening in spite of them, but they didn't like it. So the pushback was incredible, and the energy, I'll say, okay, and the
mm,
perseverance necessary that to push forward in spite of basically, a majority of leaders in the organization not wanting you to succeed was incredibly challenging, to say the least. I happen to have a Norwegian background. My grandparents were
mm.
born in Norway. I'm a Viking, and there is no way I'm not going to take the hill, right? So what they didn't realize is I was going to be there a lot longer than them. And I was stubborn, I was obstinate, I was energetic, and I just pushed and pushed. And I believed in my stuff. I believe, and not from an ego perspective, but from the perspective that I knew we could win with this approach.
Mhm.
And the only reason I knew that was because people told me, Roy, we're on the right
Yeah.
path, man. Just keep going. Keep whatever we're doing, just keep
Mhm.
going. And that kind of lit my fire, and I just kept going. But the stick to itiveness requirement for anybody who wants to make a big change is critical. If you don't have that, you will not make it. Simple as that.
Yeah. Thank you, Roy. And you're right. Stick to itiveness. I love that word because it just means that no matter what, you're moving forward. I love it.
Yeah,
Love it.
there were every day. There were days when I'd get about 6 o'clock at night and go, oh, shit, I mean, this is just, I was
Mhm.
married and I had a family, and I just can't do this anymore. And then I would take
Mhm.
us. Then somebody would come into my office and they would say, "We're doing the right thing, okay?
Mm.
They were coaching me, right? You're doing the
Yes.
right thing," and that gave me the energy to keep going. I mean, that's so important to have that kind of feedback, and that's sort of an advocation of people in your organization that believed in you. I mean, how many
Mhm.
people have that? I mean, how lucky was
Not
I?
many.
I
Not
know.
many.
And I still
Well, and
run into them on the streets, and they remember the day, right? They
Mhm.
remember.
Well, and the thing is too is sometimes as entrepreneurs, professionals, speakers, coaches, consultants, it can be a very lonely road, right? Because you don't have a big company around you. A lot of times it's you and maybe a couple employees or maybe a group of freelancers or whatever. So one thing I've learned is it's important for me to have community, entrepreneurial community around me, so that when I do have those days, I love my husband dearly, but he's not entrepreneurial, uh, and that's okay. He loves me the way I am, and he lets me be an entrepreneur. But you have those days when you really want to quit. So if I went to my husband and just started saying how hard it was and that I wanted to quit, he'd be like, "That's okay, dear. I understand. It's okay. If you want to quit, I
Yeah,
understand," right?
yeah, exactly.
Because he's thinking
Exactly.
he's loving me and supporting me, right? But when you get around a group of entrepreneurs, they look at you and go, "Yeah, I know it's difficult, but suck it up, buttercup. Get back in there and keep going because you're going to do it." And then they help you find a solution.
Well, the other thing for me was finding the right mentors.
Mm,
And entrepreneurs need the right mentors. They don't need mentors with a PhD in economics, right? They need mentors with an MBA, Masters in Business
yeah.
Achievement. As I said earlier, they need to find people like myself who have struggled through it. Okay, it's
Mhm,
not textbook stuff. I can tell you the pain points, et cetera, et cetera.
mhm,
And it's sort of a sounding board, and it's a disciplined, credible source of feedback for that person. In addition to the community observation that you make, and I so agree with that. You have to have that around you for sure. It's like this risk reward blanket, right? That
mhm.
you just snuggle into after a while when it's cold and stormy out there, and no, everybody hates you, and everybody's trying to get you. So we need that. We need
Yeah.
that more than often, I think.
When I think of mentors, I almost think of like soldiers who have been in the trenches and won the war. They've seen
Boom.
it all. They know the good, they know the bad, they know the ugly, and they made it through.
It's so true. I love talking to CEOs of new companies that they want to start, and I ask them to tell me about their idea, and they're so excited to do it. And I said, okay, tell me how your idea is different than everybody else's out there. And they stop and they think, oh, and they have a hard time explaining it. So I just say to them, stop spending
Mhm.
money. Okay, what you're going to do is take a step back and figure it out. This whole notion of differentiation is another piece for me that I learned very, very, very early was not very well done by organizations. And to be honest with
Mhm.
you, it's not being very well done today.
No.
Everybody uses "we are the best, we are better, we're number one, we're the leader." That's what I call in my world now, in my writings, claptrap. It's meaningless, senseless, useless claptrap because, from a customer's point of view, it doesn't help them answer the question, why should I do business with you and no one else?
Exactly.
So I had to
Yeah.
create my own. It's called the only statement. It's in all my work. It says, hey, we are the only ones who, boom, boom, boom. It's an absolute precision to your promise. It's a way of cutting through
Mhm.
the clutter. So I'll say to these CEOs, let's create your only statement. Well, Roy, I'm not special at anything. I said, yeah, you are. And if you're not, you need to create that before you spend any money. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm a hard nose, keep it honest, keep it real mentor. And some of them get quite offended. It's like it wasn't in their MBA case study. And I keep saying, you know what? Everybody does the same case studies. Why would you think you would be any different if everybody does the
Mhm.
same case study? You're just creating with somebody called strategic convergence, where you have a herd, everybody looks the same, and it may be comfortable, but unfortunately not very rewarding if you want to be successful. And so the
True.
mentorship for me takes on a really specific knife cutting edge. And I don't really, I'm not, my job isn't to be kind. It's to be honest.
True. True. Though I think just from this little bit of conversation, you're always respectful, and there is a difference.
Oh yeah, I'm not talking about being an asshole, right? But I'm talking about keeping it real, right? There's
Mhm.
no sense. There's no sense creating this sort of false sense of security around false direction, false strategy, and
Mhm.
things that I know don't work. So I'm going to
Yeah.
cut through the clutter and try and make it as quick as possible. And if it's painful for you, okay, that's a good thing because you learn
Mhm.
from pain. Because remember, pain is a strategic concept, and it gives me an opportunity to talk about that again. But of course, you have to be respectful. That's just human being stuff. Okay, but not to the point where it gets in the way of the message. That's the
True.
important thing.
True. When you were talking about that, it makes me think of Sherpas. When you go to climb a mountain, it's a very dangerous thing. And you've got two routes you can go. You can try and go and figure it out yourself and almost kill yourself. Or you can go with a Sherpa who's going to say, okay, let's get you prepared. And the preparation might be a little bit painful and uncomfortable and not things you're used to do, but that Sherpa will make sure that you stay alive. I
Absolutely
think
right.
that's
That's
the
a
kind of
great,
pain I would prefer.
yeah, that's a great analogy. I mean, look at it's pay me now or pay me later, Kim. I mean, you're going
Yeah.
to get it one way or the other. Which way do you want it?
Mhm.
Seriously, give it to me now and let me avoid it later. And maybe I can learn along the way. I mean, I call it planning on the run, right? Where
Mhm.
you plan, you execute, you learn, adjust, execute, learn, adjust. To me, that's my definition of strategic planning. I mean, not too
Mhm.
many people agree with me because you won't find it in Strategic Planning 101, but you will find it in Be Different or Be Dead, you see. And that's the textbook that makes a difference. You see the way I slipped that in there? That was not.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I loved it. So we are going to talk about your books at the end there. I want to
Yeah.
give you a few minutes because I know you've come prepared. I mean, we've been touching it on a little bit, but I want you to go a little bit more in depth on how to build a remarkable personal brand.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess if I could boil it down, it would be around this whole concept called um, creating a position in the world where you are the only one who does what you do. Okay, and it kind of relates to the previous remarks I made around the fact that we have so much claptrap communications clutter out there around people claiming to be this and claiming to be that isn't really helpful. And everybody does it. So if everybody's claiming to be better, it makes them all the same. And in my world, all that does is increase the common, boring, traditional herd by one. And that's not where you want to be. Or it might be, which is fine. You can stay there and be comfortable in the herd. But if you want to break away and achieve some greatness, got to get out of the herd. The main way to do that is to create an only statement as a beginning. In my day, and I got onto this really. I mean, I had to do this because the business I was in had to be special and had to be remarkable, but it had to be explained in a granular way that made sense to customers. Okay. And so my brand today is all based on Be Different or Be Dead, audacious, unheard of ways, non traditional, get rid of the claptrap, execute first, plan second. The execution platform is huge. Okay. Because this isn't about your ideologies. Brands are not about ideologies. Is what you do in a way that's different than everybody else and satisfies what people care about. And that's an
Yes.
important distinction to make. It's not about egos. It's not about making it about me. It's not about doing
Mhm.
something different just to be different. Being different is about stepping out in a way that's different from everybody else in a way that people care about. And so I've spent literally my whole life doing that. I applied it to business, I've applied it to my career. Roy is the only author, entrepreneur, and executive leader
Mhm.
who delivers proven and practical, audacious, unheard of ways, because nobody else talks about it, that builds performance that you said earlier. I mean, that didn't come by accident.
No,
That
it
was
didn't.
crafted in a very, very specific way because people are always looking for different ways. And what I try and do is give them a how-to way, a roadmap to get there.
Mhm.
And that distinguishes me from others who, generally speaking, will take an academic view towards stuff. Like I've often been asked, why don't you like blue oceans, Roy? Well, I don't like blue oceans, okay, because they're not terribly helpful to me as a business leader that has to drive superlative results by knowing specifically how I can use that blue ocean to light fires in people to get them to execute better. And unfortunately, the concept, although it may satisfy the academic curiosity of a lot of people, doesn't have that practical dimension. So for me, it's not of any use at all. So my brand is about doing it. It's the utility guy. I mean, I used to get called in when there were problems that nobody else could solve because I
Mhm.
was a practical person, right? I didn't look, I
Mhm.
put the textbook aside and said, that was helpful for now. Now I got to move on. But it all started with, how can I do things differently? I would look around
Mhm.
and see what other people were doing, and get bored by a lot of it, and say, I got to figure this out. I got to do this differently in a way that
Mhm.
people care about. And that guided me my whole life. And so it led me to things like surprise them. Surprising people is an excellent way to get them to go, wow,
Yes.
hey, that's something else. Go contrarian, do a 180. The herd's going east, I'm going west, and I'm going to find a solution going west, right, to
Mhm.
what people care about, right? Being imperfect fast, creating, not copying. I mean, I am an
Yeah.
absolute disbeliever in benchmarking. I think it's the most horrible, dishonest practice in the world. Okay, and I'll tell you why. Okay, the original concept of benchmarking under total quality management was to address efficiency, right? To look
Mhm.
around and pick somebody who's good, for example, at CRM, and copy them in hopes to get some efficiency. But what's happened is that whole original intent has bled into using
Mhm.
copying as a strategic tool. And so now people copy strategies. Well, if a strategy isn't working for you, why should I think by taking it and copying it's going to work for me? Okay, and so the bleeding process of benchmarking
Mhm.
into strategy is laziness, is what it is, because people are doing it all over the place. I wouldn't do it. I mean, I think the moment you go onto Google, right, and you try and Google what somebody's doing, you better be asking yourself, why am I being a copycat? Because it's adding no strategic
Mhm.
value to me or my career, or in many cases, my family and my life, because there's no
Yeah.
originality. It's unremarkable. And so you need to break away from that. All of that stuff is
Mm.
what I was immersed in my whole life. That's my brand. And so if you ever said, wow, I benchmarked blah, blah, you better stand back because I'm coming at you. I mean, there's no
You're
way to
getting the
run.
soapbox out.
You can run, but you can't hide from Roy. He's a Viking, remember?
I what I really appreciated what about what you said there is, um, I can't say that I've done things radically different as you have. But, first of all, being a female publisher, that's unusual. Secondly, I do not have an MBA. I've never been to college or university, though I did graduate from high school. And third is I'm not a traditional publisher. There's some things that I do that's totally different than publishers. I take no royalties from my clients' books. I hold no copyright to my clients' books. And the philosophy is that, like I work with consultants, professionals, entrepreneurs, coaches and speakers. These are people who are using these books for marketing tools, and they need to be able to use them in the way that they need to be able to use them. And so for me, I'm not a traditional publisher at all,
Well,
because I
that's
want to see my
excellent.
clients succeed. It's
Yeah.
not about me succeeding, though I do succeed. It's about them succeeding and giving them the tools that they need to be able to use their books. So I love that, because that's a bit of affirmation for me, because I have not taken the traditional road in any of my entrepreneurship journey, and it's nice just to see someone else uh, who hasn't, and it just encourages me greatly.
Well, that's terrific. I'm so glad. I mean, look at we need an advocates army around this whole
Mm,
notion of being different. Okay, in a
mm,
way, again, a way that people care about, and getting rid of the
mm,
ego stuff and so forth. We need an army, and I'm hoping, Kim, to be honest, that through, I mean, this is about my 50th podcast since my new book launched in May, and I'm just hoping that by doing this, we can
mm.
create some more advocates and believers in the root, and we start to convert people
Yeah.
one by one and 10 by 10. I mean, my ultimate goal is to change the conversation in the world away from best in class and that sort of thing towards being different in a way that's adding value to society and to life. And if
Yeah.
I can do that, and I guess if that's kind of been a failing, like I've been banging around this stuff for 4 decades, And I'm not happy with the progress I've been making, to be honest. And maybe it's because I'm not working hard enough. I don't know, but I wish I could stand and say, hey, listen, I've achieved 50% of my goal. Well, I can't say that. And it just goes to show you how difficult the journey is.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, speaking of your books, we are going to transition. And so, first of all, I'd love for you just take a minute or two to talk about your newest book. And then I've got a question I'm going to ask you that I ask every author who's been on the show.
Okay, so this is my seventh book in the Be Different or Be Dead series. The first book I wrote in 2009, and it was called Be Different or Be Dead: Your Business Survival Guide. And all of these can be seen on my website, Be Different or Be Dead. The whole notion is differentiate, 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 be different, execute, execute. And this latest one, called the Audacious Unheard-of Ways I Took a Startup to a Billion, is I simply updated the information. I mean, the basic body content hasn't changed. The interesting thing for me is, to most people, it's new. And yet I first started writing on this like literally 13, 14 years ago.
Yeah.
To just to show you the inertia out there. And it's not because I've been sitting around kind of twiddling my thumbs. I'm hammering this thing as hard as I can. But there's an incredible inertia out there for doing things like this, for being audacious, because we've been taught to comply. We've been taught to conform. Just look at the education system. We could do a whole show on that, by the way, because clearly I've got some views that are not consistent with breaking away, right? And so the latest book is another attempt to kind of like update the information, because the more I write about it, Kim, the more I learn about my own stuff. You know this. It's incredible. The process of just working with your stuff opens up new insights, etc. And so I took that, and that forms a basis of the seventh book, around audacious, unheard-of ways, and just trying to bang it and banging it and expressing it in different ways, because people learn differently. And so I start out the book by saying, I apologize for the strategic repetition that some of you may realize when you read the book, but it's done on purpose, right? To try and accommodate different learnings. And so we launched it in May, and it's been a blast. It's been fun. I just love having conversations like this, and I've been using this as kind of like my mainstream communications strategy, if you will, around the book, because the conversation style is an easy style for me to talk about what's going on, and I think it gets you out of that era of formality and so forth, down to really grassroots talking and expressing thoughts, which has always worked for me. So very exciting. I have no idea whether I'm selling any of these things, to be honest. It's not really a big priority. I mean, I hope it's like a handout. This is a how-to manual of Roy. I hope you get it, just to learn a few things. And if you want to share it with 100 people, great. That's even better.
That is wonderful. So, Roy, I'm going to ask you the question that every author gets asked on this show. What was the good, the bad, and the ugly of publishing either your first book or one of your books?
Well, the good is actually what I just mentioned. Is the good part about writing every one of these 7 books has been that I've learned more about my own stuff. I've learned more about Be Different. I've learned more about organizations that are practicing it. So it's giving me good positive feedback, in a sense that we actually are making some progress. I get emails from people saying, "Hey, Roy, here's my only statement. What do you think?" And so through the publishing process, that's exposed me to a lot of people learning more about my stuff. And I would say that, and being an ex-chief marketing officer, the whole marketing process is in my veins. It's part of me, and I love doing that. But there's also some bad spots. And and these are the pedantic pieces of publishing that I stumbled over. In this latest book, I actually found out that I had to go learn Word. Okay, because in order to make my manuscript publisher ready, I had to know the difference between a hard thing and a soft thing, and the right kind of quotes, and oh, I got to tell you, that was painful. I finally got to the point where I said, I can't do this. I need somebody to help me. It was so stressful, right? When I should have been thinking about how am I going to get my word spread, I was worrying about, hard and soft returns from a
You're
Word
you're you're
document.
dealing with all of the nitty-gritty formatting stuff.
Oh, I hated that stuff. That was bad. The ugly piece for me, and really, I didn't. I had a hard time with this one because I'm stretching this is every process is tedious, and it never goes smoothly. And I know that I'm the be different guy, right? I know there's no plan A that's perfect, and yet every time I went through this 7 times, I experienced the same thing, the same process issues around publication. But I expected that. Didn't make it any easier, but that's about the only thing that I could say was ugly. You know what? I mean, for me, every day is a learning experience for me,
Mhm.
and I go into everything saying, "Hey, I'm going to get at least one really be different gem out of this that I can
Mhm.
use in my work, in my life, that I can pass on to others." And the publication process was certainly no exception. I loved it overall.
Thank you, Roy. We are out of time for today. So, Roy, if people have been listening to this and they're like, I need to connect with Roy, how can they connect with you? How can they get your book? And do you have any giveaways?
Well, I don't have any giveaways because I can't send them all over the world because my chief financial officer, who is my wife, says that would be a crazy thing to do. Well, she's got me on a budget, so you'll have to talk to her. But you can come and visit me at bedifferentorbedead.com. I have a website, and I've tried to enrich it with the kind of resources that would help people. Like I blog every week. So
Mhm.
in terms of content, I've been blogging about Be Different or Be Dead since 2009, since the
Mhm.
original book. So there's lots of content. And don't ever think that it's not up to date. Because like I told you, when I look at the world out there, it's not different. So everything I'm talking about is probably more relevant today than it was 14 years ago. So there's a blog. There's also a page that outlines my books and gives the opportunity
Mhm.
to purchase one if you want. But the other part for me is I have an email address. It's roy.osing@gmail.com. And I'm really happy to have a conversation, Kim, with anybody on any aspect of this. People are now emailing me to say, well, yeah, I heard you say this, but what about that? Or here's my only statement. What'd you think about that? Or, hey, I've got this thing in my career and I need a decision. What do you think about this? And I mean, the dialogue and the connection and the engagement for me, it just makes every day special. So please reach out. I'm here to help, and I will definitely read every email. Always have, probably always will.
Thank you so much. This has been Kim Thompson Pinder and Roy Osing on the Author to Authority podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you on the very next episode. Bye now.